Welcome everybody to another one of our Sunday night videos, and I hope that this is going to be helpful for you in preparing for our Sunday night study.
Yes, and we're really excited about this coming Sunday because at our Sunday night service, our deacons are going to be leading worship and Bible study, and then afterwards, they're going to be serving us a meal.
That's right, and as you may already know, speaking of deacons, the original word that is in our Bibles is the word diakonos, which is actually just the Greek word for servant.
And that makes perfect sense because that's exactly what a deacon is supposed to be, a man who serves the church in a specific area of need. But we wanted to talk to some of the deacons and figure out a way or get information from them on how they deal with serving.
Right, so we are going to ask them 3 questions, and I have a feeling we're going to get some interesting answers. So let's go.
The customer might always be right in their mind, but they might not know really what it is they're after. And part of our job is trying to help define what the problem is, what is the problem statement. So, yes and no.
It is my job to make them feel like the customer is always right. Regardless of actuality, that is part of my job, to make sure that they feel like they are right regardless. Obviously, the customer is always the most important. That whole process of making them feel important is also trying to make them feel right while also getting your point across at the same time. Meeting somewhere in the middle in the best case scenario. So,
the customer is not always right, and the reason for it is a lot of times they don't know what they're talking about. They come asking me for questions, and I give them the answer, then they want to do something different. So
in this particular meeting got really ugly. The teacher was all for this happening, and so she was an ally. But the superintendent stood up and banged on the table and said, "This cannot happen. We do not have the funding to take care of this." And when that meeting was over, the child got bused from his district to the school because I simply asked the superintendent if he had a checkbook with him. And he looked at me and he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, when I go to the state and at the federal level and they pull your funding for your school district because you're not meeting the federal guidelines for this child, you can fund the school system with your own money." I was a young new worker at that point and was bound and determined to save the world.
It's not really like a singular example. I think we just kind of, some of the harder experiences we have with customers are when they're not clear on what it is that they need, or we don't have the information that we need to do the job right.
Obviously, whenever you're dealing with people's kids, a lot of times you're going to have a very upset parent. So kind of the same thing. Try to be calm and let them speak a little bit, let them get their frustration out, and then try to get them to see the other perspective too. I mean, because anytime you're dealing with someone else's kids, they want to not hear both sides of the story always, So trying to explain to them that, hey, there are 2 sides. What your kid, you don't want to tell them that their kid is not telling the truth, because sometimes they are, but a lot of times they're fudging that a little bit, so.
it was a situation. We had an engine, a Honda engine that went down to the customer, and you never want to belittle a customer in any way. You obviously want to ask them the very basic questions just to make sure they're covering all their bases before you go down to do any type of warranty process or anything. This gentleman seemed like he knew what he was doing. We sent an engine down there. He came and picked one up, and he went down to Clarksville and called us as soon as he started to turn it on. Said, "Hey, this engine you just sold me is not working." well, what's going on? Obviously, you start troubleshooting and trying to figure out what's going on. We don't ask the very simple question as, did you turn the engine on? And with an electric start engine, obviously there's an on and off. So we get down there and flip it on and it starts right up. So after that, I will always start with the very most basic question and then work our way up. So.
Yeah, we had one out in Plano in Bowling Green. There's a hole in the floor in the bedroom, and they had a pig that lived in the hole in the floor. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Like 15, 20 years ago, I was delivering feed in one of our feed trucks, and I'd backed up and augured the man's feed into his bin. Well, they have these, it's a rope tied to a big wooden board that they would put in their manure troughs where the cows stand in the barns, and they take their horses or draft horses and pull that out into the wagon that they would go spread it, and then they'd pull it back and forth. Well, anyway, somehow the rope was outside, and when I took off, it got wrapped around my axle, and I drug all that crap just out in his yard and didn't know it, and drove off, and that board sitting there flapping around behind me, probably 100 yards behind me, going down a driveway, and it finally hit a fence. I just still didn't know it. It hit a fence post and wrapped around it and then tore off. When I got back to work, they called me, but the guy was just laughing the whole time he was talking to me and said, "Oh, my entire family got a good laugh out of this one." So
something. One day we were getting ready for a fire drill, and I told them that, hey, get to class, we're about to have a fire drill. And they get about halfway down the hallway trying to get to the classroom, and it goes off, and they just dive. They face plant forward, like, because they weren't expecting it, even though I told them it was happening. So he heard it for a while. A lot of times people will come walking around the corner. I'm down 6th Avenue. They'll come walking around the corner, and for some reason the floor must not be level or something right there, and they'll roll an ankle or they'll fall, and the camera's right there. Carrie actually did it one day, and they shared the video around school for that.
We hope you've enjoyed this as much as we did. I'm sure you have answers to these questions as well.
Yeah, and we're hoping that this is going to get you thinking about how difficult it is sometimes to serve, because the customers or the people that you're supposed to be serving don't always make that easy on us.
No, yet as Christians, that's still what we're supposed to do. We're still called to serve, regardless of how easy or difficult it might be. And that's what we're going to be talking about on Sunday night. So be here February 6th at 5 p.m. We look forward to seeing you there for fellowship and a meal afterwards.